For years, football tried to destroy Tiki-Taka. Then, something stranger happened. It disappeared without anyone agreeing on why. Not after a catastrophic defeat. Not after a rule change. Not even after Pep Guardiola walked away. The style that once seemed impossible to stop simply faded until people started talking about it in the past tense. Which creates a paradox. How does one of the most influential ideas in football history vanish, while so many of its principles are still everywhere? Most explanations point in familiar directions. Pep left, Xavi and Iniesta grew older, the squad changed, the game moved on. Yet none of those answers survives close inspection. Because if Tiki-Taka was only a collection of players, why did versions of it appear elsewhere? And if possession football truly failed, why do Europe's biggest clubs still spend fortunes trying to dominate the ball? The investigation leads somewhere much less obvious. But to find it, we have to start with a misunderstanding.
At its peak, Barcelona looked almost unfair. Opponents chased shadows while the ball moved in perfect rhythm. The obvious conclusion was that Barcelona won because they kept possession. Guardiola repeatedly suggested something different. Possession wasn't the objective, it was the instrument. The real target was space. Every short pass forced defenders to shift. Every shift distorted the defensive structure. Every distortion created a new possibility. The ball wasn't being protected, it was being used to manipulate the opponent. That distinction matters. Because if football misunderstood what Barcelona were doing, it may have misunderstood why it eventually stopped working. And that's exactly where the evidence begins to change. When Guardiola left in 2012, the blueprint didn't disappear. Barcelona still controlled games. They still completed extraordinary passing sequences. The philosophy remained visible. Yet another pattern quietly emerged. Possession stayed remarkably high. Penetration became harder. The ball continued to circulate. Defenses increasingly remained intact. At first, it looked like a temporary dip. Then the same pattern appeared against different managers, different leagues, and different opponents. The question was no longer whether Barcelona had changed. The more interesting question was whether everyone else had. The aging generation theory seemed persuasive. Xavi inevitably lost mobility. Iniesta eventually moved on. Sergio Busquets could no longer solve impossible situations forever. Those changes mattered, but they don't fully explain the evidence. Replacing elite players should reduce execution. It shouldn't consistently change the way opponents react. Something deeper appeared to be happening. Notice how teams started defending Barcelona. Instead of pressing every pass, many accepted controlled possession in harmless zones. Compact blocks replaced frantic chasing. The objective shifted from winning the ball immediately to protecting dangerous spaces. Football hadn't necessarily learned how to steal possession. It had learned when possession wasn't actually threatening. One mystery suddenly had an answer, which created another. Where did that collective understanding come from? Ironically, from Barcelona themselves. No team in modern football had ever been studied more obsessively. Every rotation, every positional overload, every pressing trigger, every escape route. Coaches unable to recreate the system spent years searching for ways to interrupt it instead. The very act of dominating the sport accelerated its own analysis, and gradually, patterns became predictable. What once looked revolutionary became familiar. The revolution educated its own resistance. Seen through that lens, the rise of coordinated pressing looks different, not as the opposite of Tiki-Taka, but as one of its unintended consequences. If Barcelona created numerical superiority around the ball, opponents created numerical superiority around the likely receiver. If Barcelona insisted on building patiently from the back, pressing systems evolved to trap those exact sequences. The contest wasn't possession versus pressing. It became a battle over who controlled the next decision. But even that explanation leaves something unresolved. Manchester City later conquered Europe using many principles inherited from Guardiola. Barcelona themselves occasionally reproduced flashes of the old brilliance. So why couldn't the original ecosystem be rebuilt? The answer may lie in something cameras rarely capture: shared memory. For years, La Masia produced players who had solved the same tactical problems together from childhood. Scanning became instinct. Distances became instinct. Timing became instinct. The football often looked improvised. In reality, it rested on thousands of rehearsed recognitions accumulated over years. A transfer can replace talent. It cannot instantly replace collective intuition. Football rarely notices invisible relationships until they disappear. It didn't feel like watching a dynasty collapse. It felt like watching a language slowly lose its native speakers. Then the environment changed again. Barcelona increasingly recruited exceptional players formed in different football cultures, each bringing different habits and interpretations of space. At the same time, elite football itself accelerated. Sports science improved, recovery improved, physical output increased. Top teams became capable of pressing with greater intensity for longer periods without sacrificing technical quality. The conditions surrounding Tiki-Taka were no longer the conditions in which it had first flourished, and every successful system is partly a product of its environment. The investigation had started by looking at Barcelona. Now it was pointing toward the sport itself. At this stage, another assumption deserves questioning. Perhaps Tiki-Taka was never an especially useful label. Many within football disliked it because it reduced an intricate positional philosophy to endless sideways passing. Supporters often copied the visible patterns. Elite coaches copied the invisible ones: control of space, occupation of zones, rotational structures, press resistance, rest defense. Across Europe, those concepts quietly migrated into teams that looked nothing like Guardiola's Barcelona. The passing style evolved. The underlying logic survived, and suddenly the mystery takes one final turn. Maybe the original system wasn't defeated. Maybe it dissolved into modern football itself. Think about any transformative invention. Its first version rarely remains dominant forever. Not because it failed, because its best ideas become standard practice. The original loses its uniqueness precisely because everyone else adopts pieces of it. Viewed this way, Barcelona's greatest tactical achievement carried an unavoidable cost. Every opponent learned from it. Every coach borrowed from it. Every analyst dissected it. Its greatest strength, its novelty, could never be recovered. So when people search for the day Tiki-Taka died, they usually search for a culprit, a coach, a transfer, an aging squad, a financial mistake. The evidence points somewhere quieter. No single opponent ended Tiki-Taka. No single season buried it. The game gradually absorbed it until the original form no longer possessed the advantage that made it extraordinary. The style did not disappear because football rejected it. It disappeared because football learned to speak it. And perhaps that is the only way truly revolutionary ideas ever die.